بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. I praise Allah تبارك وتعالى. I ask Allah to send countless blessings and salutations on Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family and his companions, and all of those who follow them in excellence until the day of judgment. Inshallah, let us continue. Bismillah. We reached up to what page are we on?
149.
149. Go ahead.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, said, Imam Al-Ubbi, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, mentioned words that deserve to be considered a golden principle in this issue. He said, the principle that must be given consideration is that which is impossible to ascribe to the divine essence or the attributes is impossible for it to be found in a mass transmitted decisive text that does not carry the possibility of interpretation.
This is an important rule. Whenever you have something that is impossible to attribute to the self of Allah and his attributes, then it is also impossible that you have a mutawatir hadith, a hadith that is related from whole routes and whole routes and whole routes of people from generation to generation that conveys that point, and you cannot make a figurative interpretation of that narration. Now,
the most that can occur is for a mass transmitted text to indicate something impossible via its outward indication. Dalal Zahira. And that which is outwardly apparent can accept interpretation. So, if such a text is cited, its outward and impossible meaning must be disregarded. After that, there was a difference of opinion. Most of the Salaf refrained from figurative interpretation and said, we believe in it as it is with Allah Ta'ala in reality, and we entrust the knowledge of that to Allah Ta'ala the Glorified. Some folk, nay, even among the first group, the Salaf, took the position of figurative interpretation. And if a singular report contains a decisive text with something that is impossible, its narrator is unequivocally judged as a liar. And if it carries the possibility of figurative interpretation, it is given an alternative meaning as we mentioned previously. These words are clear-cut and precise and presented in a comprehensive yet succinct manner. His statement, and if a singular report contains a decisive text with something that is impossible, its narrator is unequivocally judged as a liar, means that the narrator is rejected because it is something speculative that opposes what is clear-cut and certain, and it has been established via unequivocal legal and rational proof that there is nothing like unto him, the exalted. So
here you have sometimes texts that are narrated that are decisive and explicit and as an evidence. Then you have some that are speculative. It can bear possibility of being right, and it can bear the possibility of being wrong. And sometimes when you talk about mutawatir, that's whole groups from whole groups, this is something that is definitive. If you're talking about something that's an individual that could be mistaken and it could be correct, then this is speculative in terms of narrations.
So it can be clearly stated that a narrator is lying if he brings any report that goes against that, because the proofs in the sacred law mutually support each other and they do not contradict each other.
Right. That means the Quran doesn't contradict the Quran, and the Sunnah does not contradict the Sunnah. So if there is a contradicting mashallah. Um, if there is a contradiction, then it needs to be joined because uh, that is something that doesn't occur. Imam Tahawi, he has a whole book on this, uh, and where you find texts that outwardly seem to oppose one another and how to join between them. Imam Tahawi, the Tahawi, the famous author of Al-Aqidah Al-Tahawiyah, he wrote a book, Bayan Mushkil Al-Athar, right? And in that book, he deals with that subject. Now,
Whoever peruses the books of our Islamic heritage written by the Imams of Islam will find innumerable quotes like the ones we have presented here, which are only a small sample, and he will attain absolute certainty that this is the correct methodology that the Ummah has concurred upon.
mhm,
Sheikh Az-Zurqani, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, said, our scholars, may Allah Ta'ala bestow them with a generous reward, agreed upon three things concerning these ambiguous texts, and beyond that they disagreed. The first thing they agreed upon was to disregard their outward meanings that are impossible, while believing that these outward meanings are false, as proven by unequivocal proofs and what is known in the sacred law by its own clear cut text. The second thing they agreed upon was that if the defense of Islam is conditioned upon the interpretation of these ambiguous texts, then it is obligatory to interpret them in a manner that will refute the obfuscations of the anthropomorphists and avert the attacks of the opponents. The third thing they agreed upon was that if an ambiguous text has one interpretation that is understood closely, i.e., without detailed explanation, then by consensus it is obligatory to hold to it. An example of this is found in the words of the Exalted, and he is with you wherever you may be. It is clearly impossible for the divine essence to be with the creation physically, so after that there remains but one interpretation, namely that he is with them by encompassing knowledge, sight, power, and will. As for the disagreements of the scholars beyond that, they have three schools of thought. As Zurqani went on to mention the method of figurative interpretation and tafweed, and then mentioned the view of Imam Ibn Daqiq al-Aid, which was a third and middle view between figurative interpretation and tafweed. Ibn Daqiq al-Aid said, regarding the
as this was mentioned by Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in Fathul Bari. Mm.
Regarding the recondite attributes, we say that they are real and the truth according to the meaning intended by Allah Ta'ala. Whoever interprets them, we look, if his interpretation is proximate based on the Arabic language, we do not censure him, and if it is far fetched, we hold back from it and return to conviction coupled with belief in divine transcendence. In reality, his view is included in the way of figurative interpretation, because there is no one from Ahl Al-Sunna except that he agrees with Ibn Daqiq's view of rejecting far-fetched interpretations that are not based on the Arabic language. The Sheikh
Uh,
and erudite scholar,
Sheikh Zarqani, in him, and we talked about Az-Zarkashi and As-Suyuti. Those three, they have authored books in Ulum al-Quran, which all three of those books written by As-Suyuti, Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, Az-Zarkashi in his book Al-Burhan fi Ulum al-Quran, and Az-Zarqani in his book Manahil al-Irfan. Those three books, all of them are in the science of the Quran, and they are among the most famous books written in the subject. All of them have this discussion and they all agreed on these issues. Mm.
the Sheikh and erudite scholar
Between a taqweed and a ta'wil.
Muhammad al-Hamid, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, said, the clear-cut revealed text, in other words, those texts that are explicit in their meaning, are the basis upon which the ambiguous texts are to be interpreted. Ambiguous meaning that which gives a meaning of resemblance to the mind. It is he who has revealed unto you the book, wherein are plain verses, which are the foundation of the book. Others are ambiguous. As for those in whose hearts is deviation, they seek out that which is unclear of it, seeking mischief and seeking its explanation. Yet none know its Yet none know its explanation, save Allah Ta'ala, and those who are of sound knowledge say, We believe in it. All of it is from our Lord, and none take the remainder except those of understanding. In other words, we believe in all of it. It's clear cut and it's ambiguous. However, their belief in its ambiguous parts does not contradict their belief in its clear cut parts that form the basis. Hence, they do not believe that Allah Ta'ala resembles His creation. Rather, they entrust the knowledge of the meaning of the ambiguous verses to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, believing that they have noble meanings that befit Him, the glorified. So they are in no way deniers of the text, nor are they anthropomorphists. Their way is a moderate middle way between the two groups that have swerved from the path of the people of truth, the extreme deniers and the anthropomorphists. This was the way followed by the early generations of this Ummah, from the companions, their followers, and their followers. Were I to quote their words, it would be long winded. However, when blameworthy innovations appeared and the heads of deviancy raised their heads and began to confuse the Muslims regarding their creed, the scholars of the Muslims became fearful over the beliefs, lest they be tarnished by corruption, and consequently they relied upon figurative interpretation of the ambiguous text within the framework of the Arabic language and
Mm-hmm.
within the confines of the sacred law.
Mm-hmm.
His statement, however, their belief in its ambiguous parts does not contradict their belief in its clear cut parts that form the basis, is a clear refutation against those who understand the ambiguous text in a physical sense. Instead of understanding the ambiguous text in light of the clear cut text, they did the exact opposite. By this action of theirs, they negated their faith in the clear cut text, such as Allah Ta'ala's words, "There is nothing like unto Him, yet He is all hearing, all seeing." The
So
esteem
there is a rule here that whenever you have those verses related to the attributes of Allah that can bear more than one meaning, one always refers them back to the explicit verses that can only bear one meaning, which is Laysa kamithlihi shay, for example, that no thing resembles Allahu tabaraka wa ta'ala. Nam.
The esteemed caller, Sayyid Qutb, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, said, "What?"
Here, I should bring your attention. Among this is something that we need to know because there's a balance that we got to find here. How should I approach this? These one of the sticky issues, and I have to say it right. We have to realize as Westerners, let's say that, as Westerners, people in America, for instance, a lot of ideas are imported to us. Not a lot. In fact, most of the Islamic ideas that we learn and concepts are imported to us. And a lot of it is based on politics. And everyone who comes to us comes with their politics. You follow my point? Everyone who comes to us telling us about Islam has a portion of their politics connected to it. Does everyone follow me here? So no matter where Islam comes from and it reaches us, we must understand it has a portion of the politics of the people who bringing it to us. This is a known fact, right? Y'all follow me here? With that being said, it is our job to learn to distinguish between matters. Our concern is truth and falsehood, not groups, not individuals, and not politics. Our job is to distinguish between truth and falsehood, not individuals, not groups, and not politics. Last time. Our job is to distinguish between truth and falsehood, not individuals, not groups, and not politics. With that being said, so when we're in the search for truth, truth may come from people whose politics we totally disagree with. We're only interested in the truth, not their politics. Because a person has wrong things, that doesn't mean he has no truth. Yes, that's correct. Because he has wrong things does not mean he doesn't have truth. Our job is to see what is right, take what is right, see what is wrong, leave off is what is wrong. Right? That's our job. What is correct, no matter who says it. What is wrong, no matter who says it. Right? So now that we're talking about, with that being said, the author here is pointing to a ta'wil that it is the position of Ahl Al-Sunna. And after mentioning all the examples, he used another example by an individual who had some politics and some ideas that contradict the methodology of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah in those issues. The author is not talking about those issues. He's talking about the subject matter he's dealing with. Hence, he's mentioned in that sense. For us, we're looking at the subject matter, not so much the individual. Go ahead.
Likewise, the throne. We believe in it as he mentioned it, and we do not know its reality. As for rising above the throne, we are able to say that it is a figure of speech denoting complete control over the creation. We say this based on what we know from the Quran with certainty, that Allah Ta'ala, the glorified, is not subject to change, so he is not in a state of not being risen above the throne, and then followed by a state in which he is risen above it. The statement that we believe in istiwa, while not comprehending its modality, does not explain the statement of the exalted. Then he performed the act of istiwa. It is more fitting that we say, it is a figure of speech denoting complete control, as we mentioned. This interpretation does not depart from the method we mentioned just now, because it does not spring from our conceptions and ideals. He also said in his explanation of Allah Ta'ala's words, the All Merciful rose above the throne. Rising above the throne is a figure of speech indicating the utmost domination and exaltation. The methodology of Sayyid Qutb in the Loud is between figurative interpretation, which he first held to before revising the Bilal, and tafweed, that he inclined to later on. Both methods are the truth. Nay, the way of tafweed, which is the way of the majority of the pious predecessors, is more fitting to be followed as long as there is no need for figurative interpretation. The final view that Sayyid Qutb settled upon is much like what is ascribed to some of the Imams, such as Imam al-Juwayni, al-Razi, and al-Ghazali, and others. Some people understood from it that they abandoned the way of al-Ashari. We have already refuted that notion and explained its falsehood, just as we explained that the methodology of al-Ashari was both figurative interpretation and tafweed, and that they left figurative interpretation and returned to tafweed, which is what the majority of the Salaf were upon. We mentioned that there is no contradiction between the two methods. Both state that Allah Ta'ala is transcendent above the traits of imperfection and contingency. Both engage in interpretation. The Salaf's interpretation was non-specific, and the latter-day scholars' interpretation was specific. Sheikh
Allah.
Umar at Tilmisani, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, said regarding Allah Ta'ala's words, and the heavens are enveloped with his right yad. This right yad that is indicated in the noble verse is the power to fold the heavens and the earth, i.e., the ability that does what it wills, as it wills, and when it wills. Sayyid Qutb, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, said, all of the images and scenes that appear in the Quran and Hadith are only approximations of realities that man is not capable of comprehending without them being expressed in a way they can understand and in an image they can conceptualize. That includes this image that expresses the reality of universal power that is not restricted by a shape, bound by a direction, or limited by a limit.
And
The
you got to
Imam,
remember, all of them were in Azhar. So in many areas, they had the creed of Azhar. And then, as not being scholars, they may fell into errors just being out of their field, right? And sometimes because of their politics. But in general, you're going to find with the Egyptian people, they have some traces from the creed of Al Azhar, which is the creed of the Ash'ira. Go ahead.
the Imam and caller Hassan al-Banna, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him, said, regarding this issue, the people are divided into four groups. The first group took the outward meanings as they are and ascribed to Allah Ta'ala a face like the faces of the creation, a hand like their hands, laughter like their laughter. These are the Mujassima, anthropomorphists, and Mushabbiha, corporealists. They have nothing to do with Islam, and their belief has not one iota of validity. The second group denied the meanings of these attributes from all angles. Their intention was to negate all of that which that they I'm sorry. Their intention was to negate all of what they indicate. Madlulatiha from Allah Ta'ala, the Blessed and Exalted. According to them, Allah Ta'ala, the Blessed and Exalted, does not speak, hear, or listen. These are the extreme deniers, and some of the scholars in the history of the Islamic beliefs called them Jahmiyyah. These two viewpoints are false and have no basis whatsoever. Remaining in front of us are two opinions that have been the subject of scholarly investigation regarding doctrine. They are the opinion of the Salaf and the opinion of the latter day scholars. The way of the Salaf is that we believe in these verses and hadith reports as they have appeared, and we entrust the explanation of their intended meaning to Allah Ta'ala, the Blessed and Exalted. So they affirm a yad, ayn, hand, ayn, eye, ayun, eyes, istiwa, rising, dahak, laughter, ta'ajub, amazement, and so on. All of that with meanings we do
So
not
I would
comprehend.
remind you all to start to memorize uh, these uh, these Arabic terms. Uh, I think by now all of you already know when you read in translations words that their outward translation indicate to Allah organs and limbs, that's not the intended meaning that is understood from the original Arabic words. Is that clear for everybody now? Everyone understands that, right? I need to pause to make sure everyone's with me. Everyone understands that, right? Okay. So we're not going to be, as we say in our language, we ain't going to be tripping when we see this stuff. We understood what is intended, and there's the problem of translation, which is a reality, right? We face with it. So we're without us knowing Arabic language, we're going to miss a lot uh, by way of translation, and that's just something we can't do anything about. And even when we learn Arabic, we still got to learn meanings. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there are people who speak Arabic and still have bad belief. It's not going to help you, right? Let's put that up. There are people who are experts in Arabic language and have bad belief, bad creed. Put that up, please, so that we can keep that in mind. There are people who are experts in Arabic language and still have bad belief. Please put it up so we can, everyone could post it. I want that to be known. Where's my fast typers? Right. We can copy Malika. right? That's it. And likewise, there are people like myself who are poor in Arabic language, but have a correct belief. So I go both sides of the coin. There are those who are experts in Arabic language, and they have a bad belief. They believe Allah got hands and feet and is in a direction and in a place and is a body, like Ibn Taymiyyah, who is a master of Arabic language, no doubt. And you have people who have poor Arabic, bad, not good at all, but they have the correct belief. So there is still, no matter how strong you get in the language, you got to learn the correct belief. So if you read the same thing in Arabic, just change the word to Arabic. If you have a bad belief, right? Right? Doesn't help you any, right? You still have to learn the correct belief. So that is important for us to understand, right? Is this issue clear? So don't be fooled by that. Okay. Tell you. Go ahead. Because sometimes people trip out. They see hand and they see rows above, and just teach the people the correct belief. They'll be okay. They'll figure those things out. Well, which is a proof. Correct belief, that's a good question. You said if he was such an expert, then how did he get the most important thing wrong? Because correct belief is a gift from Allah, and he gives it to whomever he wills among his servants. Simple. Iman is a gift. That's a gift from Allah. He gives it to whom he wills. Arabic language doesn't ensure sound creed. It doesn't, right? If that was the case, all the Arabs would be Muslim, right? But all the Arabs are not Muslim, right? Allah gives Iman to whom he wills. That's a gift from Allah. Simple. There's no other answer. Because there are people who do far less scholarly. They weren't at his level of knowledge. They didn't have his skill in the language. They didn't have his vast memorization, and they didn't fall into what he fell into. This is a gift from Allah. هذا فضل من Allah. Right? That's a reality. That doesn't mean you don't need Arabic. It just means that that's not alone in itself going to ensure that you understand this religion properly. It will help, and it's definitely a tool you need. But, right, there you answered your own self, Abdullah. Our teachers, let me give you this. There was a man, Az-Zamakhshari. He wrote a famous tafsir of the Quran called Al-Kashaf, right? When our teachers would mention Az-Zamakhshari, and he was Mu'tazili, so he followed the way of those who deviated from Ahl Al-Sunna. When our teachers would mention him, they would say he's only mentioned for Arabic language. They would caution in that area. In Arabic, we're talking about the language. We're not talking about his belief. We're talking about his knowledge of the language. And they would emphasize that because if you saw him being quoted, and he's quoted a lot among the scholars, you may think that they're talking about his belief. They're not. They're talking about as an Arabic language, right? And this happens because he knew Arabic language. He was an expert, and he was strong in the Arabic language. So his usage of the Arabic language can be used to understand things. That's not saying his Mu'tazili beliefs are something we take. Look, it's not the case. All right, go ahead.
All of that with meanings we do not comprehend, and which we entrust to Allah Ta'ala, the blessed and exalted, the encompassment thereof. As for the latter day scholars, they said, we declare with certainty that the outward meanings of the expressions in these verses and hadith reports are not intended. Consequently, they are figurative expressions, and there is nothing preventing their interpretation. Then he
All right,
said,
let's pause there, inshallah. I want to make a few important comments, right? Listen, we're doing a lot of work that is way above our pay grade. We're doing a lot of work that is way above our pay grade. And the reason that we're forced to do this work is because others who have the ability have refused to do it for us without using that to subjugate us. I'll repeat. We are working way above our pay grade. And the reason we have to do that, because the people who are able to do what we're doing, and this is their level, have refused to give it to us. And only way they gave it to us is with the condition that they could subjugate us, which doesn't work for our life. So for us, we're going to have to work with the tools we have to get the job done, because the people who have the tools, they don't share them with us. Or they use the tools to hurt us. And we can no longer afford for generation after generation to be abused, to be subjugated, and to be underserved. We have to make a change. In that process, we're going to stumble. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to fall short. But inshallah, with the help of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we're going to develop, we're going to grow, and there's going to come a time where we're able to do it at the level we would like to do it. Is this clear? So there are three scholars, Abdurrahim: Imam Suyuti, Imam Al-Zarkashi, and Imam Al-Zurqani. Al-Suyuti was Shafi, Al-Zarkashi was Shafi, Al-Zurqani was Maliki. This is important to understand. And I think, listen, we can't keep letting people take advantage of us. We can't do it. We have to change that narrative. Being said, we have to run our own institutions. All right, I'm making a call so you understand where I'm at. We have to run our own institutions. If we're not qualified, we need to learn to get qualified, But even while we're not qualified, we got to monitor those who wish to use our lack of qualifications to take over our institutions. No. Right? Let me give you an example. If you own a home and you don't know how to repair different parts of your home, are you going to let the contractor come take over your house? And he says, okay, I'm going to fix your plumbing, but in order to fix your plumbing, I got to run the house. Are you going to accept? Even though you don't know how to plumb, you don't know how to do plumbing, would you accept that? I'm giving you an analogy. Or would you look for another plumber? Or would you go try to learn plumbing yourself? I'm giving you by way of analogy. So you have a masjid. Someone comes and says, hey, listen, you're not qualified. I need to be in charge. Well, okay, why don't you help me get qualified? You still don't need to be in charge. Maybe I'm not in charge. I'm not able to do that, but I can do this. Do you follow what I'm pointing? So you help me with that, but you're still not in charge. So I'm going to make a challenge to us, African-American Muslims. And this is not division. This is upliftment and empowerment. You must run your own institutions. Whoever doesn't want you to run an institution, get away from them. You must be in charge. And if you don't have leadership skills, they must help you become leaders. They must teach you while you remain in charge. They should not be in charge of your institutions. And you need institutions for the very dignity and honor of your children. You need institutions that are controlled, managed, ran by people who understand you, who are just like you. You need that. And if the people who are with you don't want to empower you, get away from them. You don't got to hate them. Just say, that's not good for us. So there's a call for Black leadership in the Islamic community. Black leadership. I want to see Black leaders, Black scholars. I want to see leadership that looks like me in our institutions, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, so that our children can strive to actually be empowered. Y'all follow what I'm saying? I attended a meeting, and I'm going to close with this. And I was sitting around the table with a bunch of people who together had skill sets that could solve all of their problems. But because they refused to work together, they let someone from outside come in and dictate to them what they should do in their own communities because they don't work together. So someone from outside comes in and dictates. And they use their collective resources to empower the one from outside. Hello? Did you hear what I said? They use their collective resources to empower someone from outside. But they could have got together, though one may be deficient in this area, another one is strong in this area. They could have got together, combined their resources, and solved all their problems collectively. Let's not do that. So where I'm weak and you're strong, let's bring it together and become strong. We don't need someone to take my strength and your strength and empower themselves and keep us both weak. I'm going to say it again. If you're strong in an area and I'm weak, and I'm strong in an area and you're weak, let's bring our strengths together to eliminate our weakness and not allow someone to come divide us and take both of our strengths to empower them and keep us weak. You follow me? And then have us against each other while they strip us both. That doesn't make sense. Wise people don't do that. You follow me? Let's not do that. Let's be wise. Let's think. Don't let nobody divide us. Don't let no one divide us and allow us not to move forward. For too long, they told us in their state that it's haram to be black. It's haram for black people to empower themselves. It's haram for black people to educate themselves. It is haram to black people to build. They didn't say that with their tongue. They said that with their states and their actions. And we must say no, no more. No more. No more. No. Call me a nationalist. Call me whatever you want. But call me, you ain't doing that to me no more. Call me a nationalist. Call me whatever you want. But call me, you're not doing that to me anymore. And with that, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. May Allah reward you all. May Allah keep us strong. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to realize what is for our betterment and what is for our detriment, and to distinguish between the two in a way that improves our situation. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.